Hi and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Mike, and this is the second video in the series of mini tutorials on getting the most from the tools within Photoshop, their tips, tricks, and some hidden features. Second on this list is the Marquee tool. Hopping into Photoshop, the shortcut for the Marquee tool is M. Alternatively, second icon down in your toolbar up here. As with other tools, you can hold down Shift and press the shortcut key. We'll cycle you through the options. However, with the Marquee tools, in order to access the single row Marquee tool and the single column Marquee tool, you have to actually click and hold on the icon. We're not going to cover either of these today. They're just single pixel horizontal or vertical lines, essentially. We're going to cover the rectangular Marquee and the elliptical Marquee today, which I will probably from here forward call the rectangle and circle tool. So here we go. So clicking and dragging within your canvas will allow you to create geometric shapes. So for example, rectangles, squares, circles, and ovals, horizontal and vertical lines. Holding Shift whilst clicking and dragging will constrain it to a perfect square or a perfect circle. Not holding Shift will allow ovals or rectangles. Holding Option or Alt if you're on a PC whilst dragging will create your selection based on the center point. So it will draw out from the center rather than the sides. You can also press Shift whilst doing this. Once again, we'll constrain it to a perfect circle or perfect rectangle. You can hold down Space whilst creating a selection to move the selection around as well. Holding down Shift will add to your current selection. So you see a little plus will appear below your icon, allowing me to add to that selection. Holding down Option will allow me to subtract from that selection. You can also incorporate the holding down Space as well to move your selection around. Now, once you started pressing your keys and began to drag on the canvas, Photoshop will remember what you were trying to do. You don't need to spread your fingers out crazily wide over your keys like Jimi Hendrix playing the guitar. You can just start to drag and then let go, and then repress Shift to constrain to the perfect circle and let go. So it'll only commit your selection once you actually let go, but it'll remember what you're trying to do as soon as you start to drag. So Shift will add to a selection, Option will subtract from a selection, and the final one is an intersect with selection. So that's Shift and Option. So it turns like a cross just under your icon. So I'm going to use the rectangular marquee for this one. And it's easier to show rather than to explain. So it'll basically exclude everything outside of the selection, but keep everything that's within it. So if I click and drag here, now it's going to remember that I'm trying to intersect because I've already started to drag. So I can actually let go of the keys. And I can now press Space to shuffle round. And now when I let go, it will actually exclude everything outside of my selection, but keep the selection within. Clicking and dragging within your selection, your icon will change and you can move your selection without affecting any pixels underneath it. So before I move on, if you accidentally click and deselect, or however you manage to deselect your selection, you can reselect it by simply pressing Command, Shift, and D. There we go, and it will reselect your last selection. Command and D will deselect, and Command and A will select all. That way you know you've got different options that you can use. So because we've used Command and A, we've selected all, I could go into my Marquee, hold down Option, and subtract from the selection. Or I could add to the selection using the circular Marquee. I'll hold down Shift, move it round, add. There we go. So you can make quite complex selections. So you can, like with the Move tool, you can nudge your selection by either 1 pixel using your arrow keys in any direction, or if you hold down Shift, 10 pixels in any direction. There we go. Once again, you can hover and move your marquee without affecting any pixels. Now, if you do want to affect the pixels underneath, you can use Command and J, which will make a copy of whatever is underneath. So bear with me for 1 second. What I'll do is I'll just create a background layer, put it behind there, make my selection again. Command, Shift, and D. Command and J will make a copy of whatever is under the selection and place it on a new layer above, which is perfect. And usually the way that I will work with masks rather than selections like this. However, if we were to use the other shortcut, so I'm just going to hold down Command and click on the thumbnail here to bring back my selection. You can actually press Command, Shift, and J. And what that will do is it will actually cut it from the layer underneath. Now, I don't use this because unless you're doing deliberate cutouts, it's better to have an intact layer, an intact base layer beneath. Masking would be a much better way of using this technique. As soon as you've chopped something out of a layer, it's gone. You can't get it back. So try not to use that one. I'm just showing you there for the sake of completion. So what you can do with your selections, you can press Shift and F6, which will feather the edges of your selection. You'll have to experiment with your radius. Yours will be different to mine. So because this is quite a large image, I'm going to apply a 30 radius feather. Now, if I was to do the same, Command and J to duplicate onto another layer, and I turn that off, then you see it's got a nice soft feathered edge around it. So once again, masking is what I would use for this over the actual direct Marquee Tools. This is just here for the sake of completion. These tools are quite rudimentary. Most of the advanced features will be covered in the next videos, which will include selection brushes, lasso tools, quick masking, magic wands, object selection, etc. All preparing for moving into masking advanced selections further down the line in this playlist. So for now, that brings us nicely to the end of this mini features tutorial. Thank you for watching, and thank you in advance, as always, for any likes and subscriptions. Massively appreciated. Have a brilliant day. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.